All right. Hi, everybody. It's our CFB Talk 148. It's Tuesday night. This is when we talk college football and like to hear from you. My name is Bobek Hayeri. We're hosting this on, well, I used to call it a Twitter space. I don't know entirely what to call it now. This is X, right? So I don't know. Do we call it is it now X space or is it a space X? I have no idea, but we're back. So I guess X gonna give it to you. But let's talk some college football. If you have anything you'd want to discuss, feel free to hit request, and we'll talk about anything going on. There's so much going on in college football at the moment because we're ramping up towards the season. Lots of fun things are going on. We've got media days. We're in the middle of them, actually. I mean, we just wrapped up Mountain West and Pac-12 last week. Actually, just today we wrapped up the American. And then we have Big Ten coming up momentarily this week, talking about media days. But there's so many different topics that have been coming up. Again, if you'd like to talk on anything specifically, just hit requests in the bottom left. We'll talk about whatever topic you're interested in. But a couple of topics that kind of hit me. I like kind of sweet stories, sort of just quick stories that make you kind of happy about college football. So Arkansas, their running back Raheem Sanders, he has an NIL deal with Huggies because, quote, because I have a little one. So he's a father himself, and his NIL deal is actually kind of, I guess Huggies sponsored him to promote this deal where they kind of give, a portion of diapers to those in need. So at SEC Media Days, he kind of talked about the fact that he had a deal with Huggies. And again, he kind of talks about how being a father had made him a better person and a better leader. So I thought that was a cute one. That's probably one of the better NIL deals we've heard of. So, other things that are going on in college football, obviously, as we get closer to the season, Game Day has announced their first site. They're going to be in Charlotte for week one for the Battle of the Carolinas between South Carolina and North Carolina. That's a great thing to feel. They've confirmed that, we're going to have Lee Corso back. So, again, the college football season's a bit closer. Can't wait to see which head he's going to decide to be for that game. So, again, one more step closer to the season. So, happy to see college football back. Happy to see Game Day announced. So, again, we'll see where things go from there. If there's anything you'd like to discuss yourselves, feel free to hit request. I'll let you up onto our Twitter space, or I guess SpaceX, or whatever they're calling these now that the name of the website changed. But, another funny moment here. And this is something that, again, really, I think came into play last season with TCU's rise, the Hypnotoad taking off. That was a joke originally from Futurama that became a meme. And I guess they keep making Futurama now. I'm so out of the loop. They're still making seasons of Futurama. So the first season debut apparently came out just this week. And astute viewers noticed that they made a reference to the national championship game, this past national championship game, in the first few minutes of the first episode, I guess, of season 11. In the background, there's a TV with various, fictional shows like a TV guide. And listed there are the TCU Hypnotoads versus the Georgia Bullfrogs. So I think that was the writers of Futurama acknowledging that connection. That was fun for them to see, something that they had created take on a life of its own across, multiple seasons. But last season, it really went off the deep end in the best possible way. So another kind of nice moment there. Again, if there's anything in college football you'd like to discuss, hit request. We'll hit on that. But gosh knows there's been a lot of stories this week. One of my favorites, and I don't know if everyone saw this one, but Florida A&M had one of the most awkward situations I've ever seen a head coach have to address. So Willie Simmons, a head coach we've actually talked about on our CFB Talk in the offseason, especially during the coaching carousel, because some people wondered if FAMU was going to lose him to another program, and they didn't. But he had to, quote, suspend all football-related activities until further notice after a rap video was filmed in the locker room without authorization. Now, it wasn't just because it was a music video, it was hip-hop, it was real. Boston Richie was the artist. It was because, they said some things that were kind of entirely against university policy and things that, I guess, as Coach Simmons said, what the university stands for. So I think that caused some problems. So, it's still the off season. So they were able to kind of probably have a sit down with the team and say, look, if you're going to film a music video with a major hip hop artist in our locker room. Please clear it with the university first, because there's certain things we don't want them saying. Because he's straight. I've watched the video. It's kind of funny. He's wearing a helmet. They're in the locker room. All the Rattlers gear is on, and the players are around him. So again, not entirely something that you want to have happen, especially if the content of the music video ain't all that great. Although, man, I could think of some awesome. It's some my favorite music group. I don't know if Run the Jewels would ever do one in a locker room for a football team in college football. I could totally see them, if anything, being rebellious against it. But I could think of some musical group I'd love to see collaborate in kind of locker room hijinks like that. That would be really fun. But another interesting story that kind of is today's story, I would say, at least among the P5. And Ross Dellinger was one of those that reported this, but Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh and the NCAA are working towards a, quote, negotiated resolution that is expected to see him suspended for 4 games this season due to penalties stemming from alleged false statements he made to investigators. So the gist of this is Michigan has apparently been dealing with potential level 2 violations. These are minor violations in the NCAA, at least not that severe. But the problem is the NCAA started to feel that Jim Harbaugh was lying to them. And that in and of itself is a level 1 violation. So that's actually a severe violation. So in all of this, it appears that Jim Harbaugh would be suspended. They're trying to negotiate that. He's basically admitted now that he may have fibbed. And it looks like that would mean he would be suspended for the first 4 games of the season. As astute people have observed, that would be East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, and Rutgers all at home. So it wouldn't necessarily be for Ohio State or Penn State or any of the true challengers that people are envisioning for the Wolverines. But, you know, it would still be 4 games nonetheless. Although I have to say one of the more astute people in our CFB decided to make a kind of a wacky idea, which he nicknamed the Harbaugh switcheroo. So Mason Bruin, the user Mason Bruin, suggests that the best way to do it is to have John Harbaugh switch with his brother. And then, you know, because NCAA rules don't affect the NFL, why doesn't Jim go and coach at Baltimore and John come and coach at Michigan for 4 games? But again, that's just one of those kind of wacky ideas that people get in the offseason, which makes us feel the offseason in some cases can't end soon enough. If there's anything in college football you'd like to discuss, feel free to hit request. Would love to have you up here and talk about anything going on. But, you know, another moment, sort of a sadder news, Johnny Lujack, the Heisman Trophy winner who led Notre Dame to 3 national championships in the 1940s. He was the oldest living Heisman Trophy winner. He passed away today, quite old. He was 98. But still, you know, full life. It's a tragedy when people pass. But he lived a full life, and again, he died following a brief illness in Florida today. At least it was reported today. So one sort of bit of sad news there. Again, on a bit of a wackier news, SEC preseason polls every now and again. I don't know who these folks are, but Vanderbilt, congratulations, you got 5 first-place votes in the SEC preseason media poll. That always, I think last year they had at least 1 vote. We'll see if anyone, I don't know if maybe that's a marked improvement for them. I mean, they've got 5 votes right now. Some of the users on our CFB were having some fun with that. Zealous Idea Plum 866, he's an Alabama fan, said, if Vanderbilt wins the SEC, I will get a picture of Lionel Richie along with his band, the Commodores, tattooed on my, well, you can guess the rest of that. So I think some people are happily tagging that with a remind me message so that in case on December 2nd, if Vanderbilt wins the SEC, this gentleman's going to have, I could think of worse tattoos. Oh, looks like someone wants to join in the conversation. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and let you up, Dave from PNP. There's always a weird time delay. If you ever get let up on any Twitter space or X space or whatever they call these now, once you come live, it's actually, there's a time jump because there's a slight delay. So whenever you come to the podium, you kind of, there's a weird jump in the timeline. But Dave, what's going on?
What's up, man? You know why I'm here. We had some media days today. We had the Slack media day today. We had the CAA media day today. We had some interesting comments. I'm a North Carolina E&T alumnus, so this is our first year in the CAA. They actually ranked us 10th, which I thought was much higher than I thought they would do. for us. I think we could
And they've
potentially have.
changed the name. It's the Coastal Athletic Association now. They
It's
dumped
still,
Colonial and now the
but it's still the CAA. Fun
yeah,
fact:
yeah, yeah.
A&T pushed to make the name change for that one. But I think it'll be interesting this year because A&T did lose a lot of. We lost some big players to FBS via the transfer portal. Like we lost Bashawn Tootin, which was pretty much our offense last season, and we lost two of our starting linebackers to FBS programs as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how we do in our first season of CAA. I anticipated them projecting us around like 12th, 13th. I was shocked they had us at 10th. I think we have a shot to surprise some folks this year because I love our coach. I think Vincent Brown, him being the defensive coordinator, this is the head coach for William and Mary. I think he's going to instill a pretty decent culture, and there's still a lot of talent on that football team.
And for those who might not be familiar with the CAA, they have 15 teams. So being ranked 10th isn't a bad thing at all. It's not like the Pac-12, which is 10. But or I guess they technically still have 12 now. But so it looks like what William and Mary is projected to be first. Not shocked there. They have a pretty solid program. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting year for the CAA because again, the lineup is now much bigger. Yeah, my goodness. What games got you excited going into this season?
For A&T, obviously, the Aggie Eagle Classic, which is not a CAA game, right? But that's just our big rivals against North Carolina Central University. That's on September 9th. I'm curious to see how I don't expect A&T to beat UAB, but considering that they just had a coaching change as well, with Trent Differ being the head coach of UAB, curious to see how A&T does against UAB in the opener on August 31st in Birmingham. But when it
Yeah, this is the time to surprise them, I think.
I've been told that there's been chaos in the program since Dilfer became the coach. So I wouldn't be shocked. People don't realize Vincent Brown was the defensive coordinator for Howard University when they went out to Las Vegas to beat UNLV. And so he has the capability of coaching folks up to beat these FBS programs. So I'm fascinated to see how they do against UAB. But when it comes to the CAA games, of course, I'm interested to see if A&T continues their streak against Elon. The game against Campbell, which the closer, was a big rivalry. I actually live in New England, so I'm going to be going to the game against Rhode Island in November as well. I'm fascinated to see how A&T handles the run where we got to play Delaware, Villanova, and Richmond in all back-to-back games. Luckily, 2 out of those 3 games are in Greensboro at home. So I'm curious to see how we stack up in those games as well. So I'm looking forward to the schedule with A&T, but typically when it's the first year of the CAA, they tend to give the new teams a rough schedule. They did the same thing to Hampton last year, but Hampton didn't get no favors either. So so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. This is a good yeah, look at the schedule. This is a great schedule. So I think it'll be very interesting to see how this goes for A&T in their first season in the CAA. And I think this is what I think this is something that program's been working towards for some time now to get into a strong FCS conference like this after that sojourn in the Big South. I'm looking forward to seeing how this goes. And Vincent Brown, solid hire from William and Mary, who's of course, as we just said, preseason ranked number 1 in the conference. Hiring him, the assistant head coach, and their defensive coordinator, I think that's a positive step. And I'm looking forward to see how that goes. It's really good. And yeah, it's so funny. We were just talking about Dilfer. It's so funny. We have someone who is actually covering, and he's now driving. He's heading back because they were actually today over at the American Athletics Media Day. It was also today, and he said Dilfer was probably the funnest person up there in terms of just at the podium. But of course, being fun, I mean, he's taking over a college program after coaching high school. We'll see. Sometimes that transition works great, and certainly UAB has some strengths. It's been coached well for many years prior to that, but yeah, if there's a chance to surprise them, I think this is going to be a great spot for A&T because they've done it before. I mean, it's not like it wouldn't be the first time they've beaten an FBS program. So I still remember that Buffalo game was spectacular.
Yeah.
But looks like we have someone else who wants to join up. I'm going to go ahead and let him up as well. Ronnie J. Let's see here. Oh, it's boy Ron, of course.
Yeah, and like I I've been flying to Spartanburg today because I'm going to be covering Panthers training camp this season. So for my show, but one thing is certain about the swag. I don't the Jackson State era is kind of over in my opinion, because they've lost so many players to the portal. But Florida A&M, it's pretty much Florida A&M's conference rules at this point. Even though I think Alcorn State can probably potentially do it, but we'll see. It's going to be interesting, I will say.
Yeah, I think everyone's going to be very curious to see how that program does now that Dion left, and of course took some. I mean, not just him, but I mean, other conferences, kind of poached some of that talent. Man, I'm very curious to see how that goes. I don't know who's gonna rise to take that place. If they do falter. Yeah, I have to ask you though, since we talked about it, I talked about just a second ago. What do you think of the whole situation at Florida A&M with Willie Simmons and the video that he just punished the whole
Man,
program over?
I've been trying to avoid talking about it. But they've resumed football activities today, from what I understand. So
Yeah, because it was like a teachable moment. It really felt like a teachable moment kind of thing. Like, no, of all the things that could happen, it wasn't horrible.
yeah, like I felt like yes, your word of you is like the thing is people don't realize Florida A&M as an institution is a phenomenal academic institution. But at the same time, I know so it's about trying to make sure they keep the image that they have. But at the same time, I feel like I question, would anybody care if the statement started to show up? You know what I'm saying? Like if Willie didn't do his statement and then the president didn't do his statement, and then the AD didn't do his statement, her statement. Like I question whether or not if anybody would have even said anything if no statements
Yeah,
were had.
I think I wonder if you'd be right on that because I think it might have just kind of sailed under the radar until somebody noticed maybe at one point this video is out. But I mean, it sounds like the video got a bit of a bounce anyway before that. Although it sounds like the coach found out because the video was sent to him. That's what I'm sensing.
Yeah. Yeah, and he probably just
not
was
the
like,
best
all right, I
way.
need to probably nip this in the bud real fast. And I can't knock him. And the crazy thing is, we just had Coach Simmons on HBCU Nightly a few days prior to that breaking. So it's just the timing of everything was kind of crazy. And shout out to him. I'm rooting for his program because I think if there's any year that Florida A&M is going to get the Celebration Bowl, it's got to be this year. They scheduled their schedule shows that as such. They have two non-Division One programs on their schedule. It's pretty much Celebration Bowl or bust for them. So if they don't get there this year, it's going to be a question of, well, when are they going to get there? But at the same time, you're not going to fire a guy that's won 9 games in consecutive seasons either. So it's going to be interesting to see how the season goes. But they should get to the Celebration Bowl. Like, the only legitimate threat to them is probably the winner of the West, the SWAC West, which is either going to be Southern or Alcorn State. But either way, they should be the favorites going to the bowl this year and to potentially win it.
Yeah, because they've got a couple of those free wins with those non D1 schools. I mean, Lincoln out in California, they haven't proven that they have much of a pulse, and West Florida's a good D2 school, but yeah, no, that'll be an easy one. And a local, I mean, but they should bring some fans though. I mean, that's not far away over in Pensacola, so that'll be a good game for I think for that program to see how they stack up. And of course, then FAMU plays South Florida. That's their FBS program they're taking
Yeah.
on next
So
season.
Brad,
So,
so FAMU has the longest home winning streak in FCS currently. And of course, yeah, so a
oh,
lot of people don't realize that. FAMU has the longest home winning streak right now in FCS. So, and that's why I've been throwing the jokes at it and saying, yeah, you guys out here playing non-Division One programs at home to keep y'all streak alive. But West Florida could give them fits. If they sleep on West Florida, the only reason why they should be able to beat those guys is because their head coach went to Townsend. Because West Florida's got national championship vibes. But their head coach went to Townsend. So they got a new coaching staff. They got a new head coach there now. But if the old head coach was there, West Florida would probably give him some problems because they're well football team.
yeah, no, absolutely. So I want to take a second and let Ronnie. You've been patient. Yeah, boy, Ron, what's going on?
Yo, what's up?
Hey,
Hey, all right. I got a question for you because maybe you know more about this than I do. So I'm moving to San Diego soon, and I'm living actually not too far from Aztec Stadium. What conference is San Diego State going to be in when I move there?
Oh, well, when are you moving? There's a question, right? I mean,
Probably September, sometime between September and November.
well, at this point, it looks like San Diego State's probably going to be there for at least a couple of years, or at the very least September. I mean, September for sure. Up until July, it was really unclear, and that was just because of the peculiarities of their agreement with Mountain West. And this is regardless of that weird set of emails they sent to the Mountain West, which we've talked about quite a bit, but I'll happily review really quick. But it looks like we've got them in the Mountain West for at least this next season, if not a couple more after that. At least 2 years seems to be what the consensus is. So as a quick summary of what happened for those who might not have, who those are kind of coming out of their college football slumber, which I don't blame you, I get it. So there's two things that are going on simultaneously. The Pac-12 had been talking about expanding, but meanwhile, we've now passed, I believe, the 1-year anniversary of Kliavkoff, their commissioner, saying they were negotiating their new media deal that would start next season. Well, that has been dragged on and on and on. In fact, right before Pac-12 Media Day last week, it was announced that they would not have the media deal announced in time for Media Day so they could, quote, focus on football. They made some references to new people at the table to potentially negotiate the Pac-12 media deal without naming any of them. You know, it begs for a whole bunch of questions like, well, who are these stations? I mean, we've literally heard everyone from normal terrestrial TV over the cable television stations to, Apple TV. Will it end up being the CW, which sounds to be apparently more plausible than people realized? It's still not sure. But the reason all of that comes into play with San Diego State is San Diego State and the Mountain West had an agreement where the teams were allowed to leave without a major penalty before basically July of this year. And July, if you know anything about college sports calendar, July 1st is like the new year for athletic departments. The previous season ends in June, the new season starts on July 1st. So that was a big deal. And there was a huge penalty involved if they didn't pull out of the Mountain West before July 1st. But they weren't going to pull out of the Mountain West unless they had a place to land. The Pac-12, meanwhile, had said, we're not going to even look at expansion or announce any expansion until we have a media deal. Therein, you can see the problem here. So with the Pac-12 delaying and delaying and delaying, and with all these conflicting statements that were coming from various Pac-12 presidents on an upcoming media deal that would never materialize, that left kind of San Diego State in the lurch. And they're in one of those ideas that sounded great on paper, but then when you do it in practice, normal human reactions don't kind of respond the way you plan. The San Diego State in June sent a letter to the Mountain West presidents basically saying, we're not leaving, but we're kind of, if we were to leave, it was just, I mean, it sounds almost as silly as that. They basically said, they were basically asking the Mountain West to say, like, look, can we get a delay on this penalty? Can we wait on this penalty if we decide to leave in July? And, a whole bunch of these questions. And the Mountain West had the brilliant reaction of saying, we're just going to take this letter as your announcement that you're leaving the conference. So we're going to go ahead and start the process of kind of pushing you out. To which case, San Diego State said, no, we're not leaving the conference. And that kind of argument is where we're at when we entered the month of July. There was a Mountain West president's discussion on, I believe, the 17th. That wasn't publicly announced, and whether or not what was the fate of San Diego State, where they're going to have to pay an enormous penalty. And from what we got from Mountain West Media Days, it seems like it's been mostly smoothed over. San Diego State's going to remain in the conference. Snapdragon Stadium, which is a fine stadium, they opened it last year. I mean, it's kind of an awkward situation because Mountain West, as much as they're frustrated with San Diego State, it's a very valuable program for them. It's in San Diego. It's in Southern California. Obviously, the basketball team just surprised everyone last season and nearly won it all. And football has consistently been good for them in the last decade, or about a little less than the last decade, around the last decade. So it's been one of those. It's definitely a love-hate relationship between all the parties involved. So will San Diego State remain in the future? That's a big, big question, because it certainly seems like if the Pac-12 expands, the safe money seems to be on Southern Methodist, which isn't hobbled by any of these issues that San Diego State has, and San Diego State. Of course, now that Pac-12 Media Days wrapped up, it's starting to feel like the conference is leading even further away from the idea of expansion. But there is certainly a benefit to adding those two programs for the TV markets they bring in, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex and Southern California, which has been completely erased next year when USC and UCLA depart. But also, hey, you know what? Regardless, San Diego is a wonderful place to live. So that's got to be a really nice move. Where are you moving from?
I'm moving from Atlanta, so the big thing is getting away from the humidity down here.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot less humid down there. That's for sure. I always say if society collapses and I need to move somewhere where, where like I don't have to worry about climate control or anything like that, it's going to be San Diego. That's like the perfect weather all year round.
Oh, yeah, and the best is I finally get to move close to my family again, which is huge. They all left me alone on the East Coast, so that's the most exciting part for me. But selfishly, I do want them to go to the Pac-12 sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it'll be for some interesting matchups, that's for sure. It'll be good. But, I mean, again, it's a great stadium to see a game. They mostly do them at night, mostly. But, yeah. So, and it's so funny. I see Jake, who is our person at Mountain West Media Day. I'm going to go ahead and pardon me, he was at Pac-12 Media Day. Pardon me. He's here to talk a little bit about that. Hey, Jake, what's going on?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Not so bad. Could I first talk about living in San Diego and how it's the best place of like the 8 different spots in this country I've lived in?
By all means.
I mean,
hey, listen, if you got any recommendations in San Diego, let me know.
Here's the advice that I got. You go to the ocean and then you start walking inland. The first place you can afford to live, you stop, and that's where you live. I had to walk 1 mile inland. Been there for 13 years. Best decision ever.
It sounds like a good idea. I'll try that out when I go there.
It's the way. It's the absolute way to do it.
So, Jake, I gotta ask you. You were the person that did something that none of us ever expected. We joked about it privately, but you were at Pac-12 Media Day, and you straight up asked Lincoln Riley to unblock the Reddit CFB account, and he did. Could you tell me more about this?
So, last year the Pac-12 Media Days was at the Jazz Club in LA, and this year is at the nightclub in Las Vegas. And it was kind of strange. Like every time I was in like the main room, I wasn't feeling really well. It was just a weird whole vibe. I don't know if there was the lights or the bass sound or whatever was happening. And so I kind of stepped out for lunch early, and I went into the large open like lunch space where there was plenty of players and some other coaches and other media that had already gathered or kind of hung out there who weren't in the main the main stage area. And so I was just looking for a table someplace I could sit, try to feel a little better, and I just kind of happened upon the only spot where there was some empty spots, and it had 3 guys from they were from the We Are SC podcast.
Yeah, I recognize them in your picture. They've actually, one of them was a guest on our Twitter space before.
Yeah, so I didn't know that, but I was wearing my San Diego shirt, and they were just kind of talking amongst themselves and talking about how much they dislike sports radio, and then they finally were like, "Wait a minute, you're kind of quiet over there. Are you a sports radio guy?" And I was like, "No," and they're like, "Well, who are you with?" Because at Pac-12 Media Days, unlike everywhere else, like they put like your name and who you're representing, which organization. But at Pac-12 Media Days, you just get a pass that says media and nothing more. So I was like, well, yeah, I'm with Reddit. I'm here representing them. And they're like, oh, all right. Like, yeah, like we know them. And so we're just kind of talking, whatever. And then there's one of them sees Lincoln Riley and says, hey, I'm going to invite him over to sit at our table for lunch. And I was like, okay, but don't tell him I'm from Reddit. And I was like, just kind of like, kind of melting into the chair a bit as he sits down like a seat or two over from me. And they're all kind of talking amongst themselves. And then finally he kind of looks over to me and he's like, so like, what kind of media are you? Are you like printer or something? I was like, a little more like tech than that. And he's like, oh, well, have I seen it? And I was like, no, you definitely don't see what we do. And he's like, why is that? I'm like, well, because you blocked us. I'm like, you blocked us on Twitter. And he's like, no, I didn't. And I'm like,
did you tell him why? Did you tell him
yes,
what? Did you at least tell him?
Because he's like, no, I didn't. I don't block anyone. I was like, oh, we're definitely blocked. And he goes, well, I got some people that, sometimes help me with my social media and I'll clean up like the riff raft and whatnot. I said, well, we're not really riff raft, but he's like, well, did you deserve to be blocked? And I said, yeah, probably. And he's like, well, what?
Well, no, I mean, for those who aren't aware, the reason this all came about was that infamous brisket photo.
That's what he said. He said, well, what did you do? And I said, well, it was about your brisket. And the table just starts laughing because they all immediately know. and I said, in some ways, maybe it was good because, your recent tuna picture, I was like, much improved, but we probably would have called back upon the brisket if we weren't blocked. So he laughed and the table's laughing and then, we kind of just sort of like forget about it and they're all talking and talking about different things. And I said, well, yeah, I said, you got that week 0 game. I said, it'd be great if we could get credentialed to it. I said, unlike last year where I was rejected. And he's like, huh? I was like, yeah, last year we, tried to get credentialed for the Fresno State game. A lot of hype having you there and Caleb Williams there. And then also to promote Fresno. And the answer we got back from USC was, well, there wasn't enough room in the press box. And I said, so I actually went to the game, bought a ticket, had a great time. So it worked out really well for me because, I had some beers with a friend and they kind of frown upon that in the press box. So I was like, it's all good. I said, but I did turn around and take a picture of the giant press box and think about tweeting out, you don't got room for one more in there? And he laughed and he kind of asked what is your guys' shtick or gig? And I said, for the most part, we're a promoter. We're like a hype man. We're just a bunch of college, football, nerds, basically. We love the game. We love the sport and we hype up anything that we think is kind of cool that we think more people should see. And I said, and that kind of goes for whether we see something that somebody tweeted or something that somebody wrote. I said, or we do these Twitter spaces, which were really big before Twitter kind of got broken. And I said, we did one with a girl who is the equipment manager from Nevada. And we thought how cool, she's a female in this male dominated space. And it's just something that we wanted to let other people know about. And it was really interesting. And I said, when we've talked about a bunch of other ones that we've done, and then the conversation kind of turned again and went on. And then I said something about how my son is going into his senior year of high school and he's thinking about applying to USC. Hopefully he doesn't get rejected like I did. And so the table kind of laughed and I said, it would be nice to be at the week 0 game. It'll be one of the last games. And I talked about how we do the Hawaii Challenge, and we always kind of hype that up. So finally he goes, okay. I said, what's more important to you, to be credentialed to a game or be unblocked? And I was like, oh, be unblocked. 1,000 times be unblocked. And then he just sort of kind of disappeared into his own self, and I didn't know what was going on. I was talking to the person next to me, and then all of a sudden he pulls his phone out and he shows it to me and everyone at the table. And he says, is this you? And it's the Reddit CFB Twitter. And it says blocked. He's got us blocked. And I was like, yeah, that's me. And at this moment, the table didn't know, was he going to unblock us? Was he going to kind of laugh? What was going on? And then he just bam, unblocked. And I was so joyous. I was like, I have to take a picture of this momentous occasion. And then he laughed and he was like, yeah, go ahead. And then I took the picture and the one that you guys saw tweeted out. And that's basically
I just hit that as a reply. I just put that as a reply to this space in case anyone wants to see. the photo you took, and it's hilarious because that's when I saw that photo. I was looking at the table. I'm like, oh, it's all the We Are SC guys.
Yeah. And look, one of the other things I actually shared with them is I said, when you're on stage, I said beforehand we were kind of prepping, and I said we talked internally. I'll go to one side of the room and be like, "Hey, Coach Riley, Water Boy here with Reddit. Just wondering, could you maybe unblock us on Twitter?" And then have Mike over on the other side of the room going, 2 questions later. Yes, my name's Mike. I'm with Reddit CFB. Coach, I noticed we're still blocked on Twitter. Could you unblock us? And he laughed. He's like, that's pretty funny. And so I told him our demographic on Reddit, the average Redditor is like a 22-year-old male. So, it is a little bit humorous, the things we do. But I also have my mom, my 2 teenagers, and my wife that all follow our Twitter account. And I'm like, we don't tweet out anything that they would find grossly offensive or anything. I was like, we try not to punch down at all. We just try to be witty and funny, kind of like that. And so he was like, he's like, I like it. And then that's when the next conversation happened. And then he unblocked us. So.
Well, I'm glad that worked out. That's just hilarious that turned out. I really couldn't believe that conversation happened because I remember when we were running that joke, have you asked that question and then have Mike and another part of the audience ask the same question, Yeah. And then end with an ominous "see you in Chicago next year" for the Big Ten. But looks like we didn't have to go to that plan.
Well, there was one other thing I did throw in there, because I don't for some reason, each thing I said just somehow the table laughed more and more. And I said, well, we were credentialed last year 3 games in LA. I said in 3 different games, including the national championship, but none of which involved USC. And the table was like, oh, I was like, to clarify, we were at UCLA, the Jimmy Kimball Bowl, and the national championship.
And it's so funny too because I saw him on the sideline of the national championship game because I was covering that game at SoFi. And walking the sideline, I saw, Lincoln Riley, and he was having a good time. It didn't bother him, but it was funny to see him. I'm like, I was tempted to actually go up to them there and ask, but I mean, I guess that worked out well. Just that timing is really funny there, man. But thanks for sharing that story.
And I'll tell you what, and he shared some other stories about his the tuna story and how he's deep sea fishing and whatnot. Of all the coaches I've got to speak with and interact with across any pro or college, only Rocky Long and him are the most just down to earth and easy to talk to. You could sit at the table with him for an hour and just have a normal conversation, just like me and you are talking right now. So a huge credit to him for being that kind of person. When I was walking away with the We Are SC podcast guys, they were already saying the same thing, and I said, the only person I've ever been afterwards, I was like, dude, that was a lot of fun. Was when I was at the Mountain West Media Days, and Rocky Long and I were just sitting at a table, and he was drawing up pictures, or drawing up plays on a napkin, and explaining to me why you'd run a certain defense against this. That's those 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've talked with both of them. I've talked definitely with Rocky Long, and I absolutely agree with that. I'm glad he's still coaching, but he just didn't want to be. I think he was just tired of being a head coach, and that's when he stepped down from San Diego State.
Exactly.
We have someone here who's been patient. I want to let him have a chance. The Millie Goats podcast. What's going on?
What's going on? I remember that photo of the tuna. That was pretty funny. We actually made a comment on the color of the pools on the cabinets and how they didn't match the kitchen for that one. So,
by the way, the one thing I have to say about all these Lane Kiffin cooking photos is I feel bad for the guy because it's clearly not his forte, but he's enjoying it, and one of the comments on RCFB when I think the tuna photos came out, and I thought this one really was the one that convinced me the most. I think it was a Michigan fan or something. He's like, I do a lot of hobbies I'm really passionate about that I just am not good at doing. And when he said that, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I definitely have some hobbies where you think you're good at it, and then you look on Instagram and you see someone who knows what they're doing, and you're like, oh wow.
Well, it's one of those things where it's you put it up there thinking I killed this thing, and in one mistake, and it's over. You are now going to be roasted for the next however long. So,
Indeed.
Can I add one thing onto that?
Yes.
Yeah, he actually was saying how his team wants him to do a brisket before the season starts and then like live stream it. And I was like, Coach, if you do that, please let me come cover it. Please, I beg you.
Well, that's one of those things. Like, are they saying do
and
it?
he said he was. He said he was serious, and he said he would seriously consider it. So, so there could be more to come, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
More to come in
What
that
he
hobby.
should do is just
Have you
lean
guys ever
into it.
seen Have you guys ever seen Mark Zuckerberg's smoking meats video? That's what I imagine it's going to be like.
Oh gosh, yes.
But I think he should just lean into it. Might as well play the role.
I agree. Go 100%.
Like, even if you just absolutely torch one, just let it go. Don't get mad about it. But I was going to ask. We're a big group of 5 guys over here at our show, specifically App State. Is the Sun Belt the premier group of 5 conference?
You know, I have felt strongly about this for I have a really big soft spot for the Sun Belt. Why? Because in 2015 we thought we would start covering, as a credentialed media organization, events. Sun Belt was the first person we reached out to, and they were the first people to say yes. But that said, after realignment last summer, I thought the Sun Belt definitely came off the strongest, because the conference, and they were always very, in a way, James Madison's a great symbol of all of this. But I mean, because the way their approach to football and growing is a lot like, mimics the Sun Belt in a lot of ways, because the Sun Belt was always about like, we have a good deal with the ESPN. We're not in any rush to change anything. And this is like 2017. Well, I remember the state of the conference, that was being said. It's like, we're going to stick with our deal. We're going to go forward, obviously adding App State and Georgia Southern and then adding, Coastal, they had a very methodical approach to all of this. And it's paid off because the programs have all kind of risen and been built up into something where, it honestly, because I remember, gosh, I think those who remember the Sun Belt football opening up, and because the conference is older than that, but I mean, in around 2001, when it looked like Middle Tennessee and North Texas were going to be like the only teams of any note in the Sun Belt, when people were trying to even predict how that conference was going to go. And then we see, those teams end up leaving. So the question was, how is the Sun Belt going to be? There was a while there where the Sun Belt seemed like it was really reeling. And then, they had football only members. And then there was that kind of, I wasn't a fan of when they kicked out New Mexico State and Idaho, and then Idaho ends up dropping down. So there's all of these kinds of, you know what I mean? It's been a real saga. So I agree with you, though. I think they are, top to bottom, the strongest of the G5 right now, and I'm excited to see, because I think one of the teams, App State certainly has a chance to, because now I believe they're opening at North Carolina, because last year that was the wild thing of obviously hosting North Carolina. I think now they're doing the return trip, and then I believe, God, who's Coastal got? I forgot they have a chance. Yes, so I have seen some wild assumptions that they might be able to upset UCLA. And I don't know, that one, that's on the wilder side. If they manage to do that, I admit in my heart of hearts, I am a USC alumnus. I would be kind of thrilled by that. But at the same time, I'm like, come on, that would be a bit of a stretch. But I think App State and, and the entire conference is going to be able to be, is going to be able to compete. And I think, at least as a G5, they are my particular favorite right now. I don't know if they have the team with the best shot. I haven't really sat down and looked at some of the schedules. I know we've talked, because you still got UTSA, you still got Tulane. Yep. So there's some competitors out there, but it's not a crazy thing to say the Sun Belt could have a team that could. I don't know if I would go so far as to say be a CFP, but certainly be the in the New Year's Six, they have a reasonable shot with some of those programs.
Yes, last year they kicked it off. App had the UNC game, and then Texas A&M, and Coastal beat, I forget who they beat. Marshall beat Notre Dame. It was absolute pandemonium up in there in the Sun Belt for the first few weeks.
Yes, absolutely. And then James Madison took forever to lose. Lose a game. And it was so awkward because I couldn't even go bowling. So
right. I think they won
this season. Do they qualify this season?
I think so, and they won the whatever side they were.
Yeah, the East. They were tied in first place for the East. Yeah, they were 6-2 in spell play, 8-3 overall. I mean, I if I'm Virginia, because they're going to be hosting, James Madison in week 2.
No.
I'd be looking out. That's
not a good look, Bob.
I don't even think it would be the first time James Madison would have beat Virginia. Actually, if we probably look down the records, I mean, historically as an FCS program,
they've had a rough go at it the past few years, Virginia, because they almost lost to Old Dominion, or was that Virginia Tech? I can't remember, but
Virginia Tech, Old Dominion's had Virginia Tech's number. That's my favorite awkward situation for an FBS program, only because we had a photographer. RCFB actually had a photographer on the field the first time Virginia Tech played at Old Dominion and lost. And that photographer, it was his first game ever. He was like, he'd never been on a field that got stormed before. But everyone in that stadium showed up on the field in moments after that game went final. So, but
I love it.
Yeah, no, I mean, so it's exciting. How about yourself? What are your thoughts on some of the season? I've been blathering on.
Who, me? I mean, it's a given what JMU did, and then you've got Georgia Southern, who's got what? Was it Helton, the coach?
Yeah, the former USC coach. Yep.
Yeah, so you've got that going on. App State's in a little bit of a rebuilding. Coastal obviously lost their coach, but I mean, Troy was very good at the end of the last year. I don't know. It's kind of a toss-up for me. I mean, obviously, as a homer, I'm an App State guy, so I'm hoping we put it together. But, I mean, it's not going to be it's not going to be easy. We ran that conference for about 4 or 5 years in a row ever since we got in there. Now it seems that everybody's what amazes me is the ability of some of those coaches in there to be able to game script and make adjustments, especially after the half. So, that was always one of the things that Napier did very well. And then the Chadwell guy from Coastal, we'd go in tied at half and they'd come out running a completely different style, or, out instead of running inside zone, they'd be running outside zone, or they'd attack a certain player on the field on defense. And it was just like, we are getting worked here. So I don't know what the coaching is going to be like with those two guys leaving. So that kind of makes it up in the air. But hopefully App State can pull it off. So,
well, I give you that, Sean Clark has been a great, coach overall. So in the 4th season of him, should be good. A new offensive coordinator, though. So how much, and actually new coordinators on both sides of the ball.
Yeah. So, yeah. Dale Jones had been there forever. So that he was there whenever we played. So, we'll see. I'm intrigued to see what they come up with, if they're going to continue to run that RPO outside zone power running game. They don't have Cam Peoples anymore, so it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that. So anyways.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and again, the amount, I always forget, like I'm just looking at across some of these other schedules, like I'm excited to see how Marshall does this season, because last year, obviously the big marquee win for them was at Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. To see how, again, Southern Miss, strong program. Would love to see them keep competing. I'm excited to see Sun Belt football. That's the thing. Like over the years, they've kind of they've worked their way up and kind of earned their position as a strong and a fairly solid. Like and maybe it's a product of the fact that they're on the stable side of college football, like the SEC and ACC aren't really looking to add anyone. If anything, the ACC is just hoping it stays together. So it keeps stability among all the conferences, while the West Coast is just chaos. Who knows?
Literally the Wild West, man. I mean, it's you don't know who's going where. Like in the whole San Diego State thing, like all I could think about was the South Park meme. We're sorry, and everybody's saying we're sorry.
It is. So I mean, that's the other thing too. Because I mean, and obviously Conference USA nearly imploded. Which is ironic, because they were the ones that went through and poached a ton of the, I remember when they poached a good ton of the Sun Belt, all those years ago. And now here the Sun Belt's the solid one. And looking at those two teams, looking at their conference, looking at the American and just kind of, staying the course. So there's a lot of credit there. A lot of credit goes to the to the way that conference has been run to stay so stable all these years. Because I remember there was some real criticism of oh gosh, what was the previous commissioner's name? It slipped my head.
Sorry, I lost you there for.
Oh, I was trying to remember the last commissioner of the Sun Belt. There was some real criticism towards him, but I think it worked. I mean, time sort of tell there. I mean, he just retired, I think, because he was finally, he'd done it forever. Like he had been the commissioner of like the WAC, he'd been the commissioner of a bunch of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, so lots of respect to him for keeping that all together. Trying to remember here.
I love that they play on the Wednesday nights. I think that's cool. They do kind of the Maction thing, and their bowl records.
Carl Benson, that was his name.
Yes. There you go.
Oh, yeah, and I forgot. Gosh, oh my God, I just love. By the way, it's so funny. I forgot Craig Thompson was actually the commissioner of the Sun Belt before he became the commissioner of the Mountain West, and he was their only commissioner until he retired last year. So, man.
Well, maybe they're trying to get some stability out there. I mean, but the Sun Belt's bowl record the past few years has been very, very good. So
absolutely. And I remember when they were struggling to get bowls. I remember when they only had the New Orleans Bowl, and then they started to try and add more. And then they added the Arizona Bowl out west because it was difficult if Texas State qualified for a bowl but no one wanted them. So they didn't go to a bowl game because they were so far west, and none of the East Coast tie-ins wanted to bring them in because the traveling fan base they weren't sure it would show. And, a lot of the minor bowls, it's a money making question. You want to be able to fill seats. Right. And that's when we had some of the Arizona Bowl was to please some of the Western Sun Belt teams.
Texas State had some awesome facilities. They got a nice little stadium down there. They got a nice Texas State.
Yeah, they do. No, they've got money. They just need to get wins. I mean, San Marcos, it's in a nice spot. It's right by. It's not that far out of Austin. I mean, one of my colleagues here at our CFB, he's getting his graduate degree from there while living in Austin. So it's a great area. It's tough, and I mean, granted, you're in the shadow of what's in Austin. That's a little difficult. It's like being Eastern Michigan. It's like you're like a few blocks from Michigan. So it's hard you're in like the rain shadow of Ann Arbor when you're in Ysplanty. It's like Mount Whitney and Death Valley. They're really close to each other.
Right.
To the point where they suck the color from the field. I mean, the field is gray at Eastern Michigan.
Oh man, did you see the picture that came out of that black turf that somebody had put down? I think it was a high school up north.
Actually, it's I know it's a lower division school, and I forgot which school is doing it. They're doing a black turf, and they're not really are they the very first to do a black field? I know it came up though, because that always gets people attention when everyone ever does a black field. For sure.
I've seen one in high school in North Carolina that was gray and purple, or maybe it was, I don't know. It was something outrageous.
Yeah. And I know that there's at least one purple field out there in FCS. And then in FCS also has one of their major premier programs, Eastern Washington, of course. Yeah. They got the red field. Yeah.
The red Inferno or whatever it's called.
Inferno. Yeah, exactly. It helps when you're up north so that you're not like having a black field in the South in this time of year. Like you might as well just light your players on fire and throw them out on the field and see what happens.
Yeah, it's like summer camp and that 2-a-days and that would be just horrific.
Oh, it would be horrendous. It would be horrible. I mean, like it would be inhumane. Oh
those
my goodness!
I see someone else get hot anyways. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I appreciate.
No. I just want to go ahead and let up one other person.
Sure.
I'm enjoying this conversation a lot. Let's see here. Ski Mask Smurfy. What's going on, man?
Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Oh yeah. I did. What you guys were just talking about, I did see that field that had the black turf, which was something crazy, but I think that's like just outside of New York City, actually. So I guess they're going to be okay during their summers, but that's still a thing.
Yes, that's it. It's in upstate. Yes, it's SUNY Morrisville. So that's exactly it. Yeah, you're right. It's a D3 program in upstate New York.
Maybe if it's sunny, they're thinking it'll heat up and actually melt the snow, and they're trying to go that way.
It's never sunny in upstate New York.
Okay, there you go. Well,
It's always. I live in Minnesota. It's always sunny and the sun doesn't do a damn thing. In winter out here, but like this is like the one hot. This is like the one hot week, right now. But
well, that's where they're playing the golf tournament.
So see, Ski Masks Murphy, what's on your mind?
I can't even remember the topic I actually wanted to talk about back when I hit request.
No worries, man. No, one thing I wanted to mention before I forget is I just wanted to, at least before I forget this, Northwestern story just keeps getting more and more awkward. So the AD, I don't know if you guys saw this. So the Northwestern AD, the Chicago Tribune, published an article where they pointed out Northwestern's AD, he was a former player himself. He was writing something he thought would help other young men playing football in 2015. And it was like advice, and I don't know if he was trying to be like cool about it or what, but it ended up having this really awkward line about calling women man's greatest distraction, and just basically you could tell it was really awkward way of trying to write about trying to talk to what he thought young men would respond to in 2015. And given all the crap that is happening right now at Northwestern, it is a PR mess one more time for Northwestern. Although it begs to wonder, maybe the reason he wasn't reading the entire report on the hazing in the program was because he was busy writing a sequel to this book. I'm not sure, but this has just been awkward times. And Northwestern, the football players, not the interim coach, the football players aren't going to be going to the media day this upcoming week, and I don't blame them for that. I mean, it's going to be just a mess for them. Let the coach deal with it. And that coach is a lame duck coach. I mean, he's the interim head coach. They just hired him to be the defensive coordinator this season, and now he's the interim head coach of the Wildcats. So it's going to be an awkward time for them. Yeah, boy, Ron, I know you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I know what the punishment should be for Northwestern, and that's they should be uninvited from the Big Ten, and they should invite University of Chicago back to take their spot until they do something even dumber.
No, and invite University of Chicago without any preparation. Like they actually now have to field.
No, that's what I mean. Like
team from D3. Like, good luck, guys.
just bring them in. Give them the stadium if they need it. I don't know what stadium University of Chicago plays.
It'll be a preparation for UCLA by using it's a dorky Reddit meme that it's UC Chicago. Instead of UC Chicago. So just call them UC Chicago. Boom, you're ready for UCLA when they arrive. They'll have a partner school. Ski Masks Murphy, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I'm a Michigan alum, so right now, like looking over to them, dealing with what we have going on, it sort of seems like perfect time for Jim Harbaugh to take his plea deal, so he doesn't have to worry about what he has going on. But I did take a course while I was at the University of Michigan, which was run by like the former PR manager, in which for one of the classes he did bring in like the vice president, the vice commissioner of the Big Ten, and he basically explained, especially because he got asked about the Penn State situation, and he said when stuff like this happens, like the whole conference becomes all hands on deck. So basically every PR person at every university is also trying to assist in cleaning this up. And given everything that I've heard so far about what happened at Northwestern, they're going to need like 2 conferences worth of PR people to handle this because everything looks horrible, including what you said with the letter.
Yeah, and I think maybe this is I guess USC and UCLA are sort of happy they're still in the Pac-12 for one last season to let this kind of go. But I mean, at this point, they've got so many of the greatest minds, I want to say, in sports working in some of these Big Ten schools. So they got their work cut out for them, that's for sure. Let me see. We got one more person who wants to come up, and I'm going to slowly start wrapping this up, but we're not in a huge rush. One other fun story, not a fun story, but awkward story. So Kansas, one of their offensive linemen, and he must be, and again, the reason I say again, I don't want to joke about it too much because statistics, medical data shows that when basically the college age of a lot of men are where mental things can come up if you're going to be likely to have some mental health issues. But an offensive lineman at Kansas made bomb threats against the football facilities and was arrested today over that. So that's kind of a wild one. I don't think I've ever seen a football player arrested for making bomb threats on his own facilities. So that is one of the more strange stories that came out in there. So again, it was offensive linemen. We'll see where that goes. A walk-on sophomore, so not necessarily a starter, but regardless, it shouldn't make a difference in terms of just the sort of the awkward and sadness. Hopefully, this young man gets taken care of. I mean, they can help him out there. But John, what's going on?
Hey man, how you doing?
Good.
So, nice to be back again. So this is a tricky question, and if you don't want to answer this, I completely understand. So, speaking of Northwestern, you probably saw it yourself. I saw you guys tweet about it a little bit. There's a certain person that's a member of the press that was talking about some very was putting up some points that were not really popular to the public, or maybe just flat out wrong. In defense of the program and the coach that was released. If most people know, it's a little bit biased because that person went to that college, has close connections to the college, and I guess my question being is, from someone who is probably is closer to the reporter world than most of us here, when do you really cross the line from really being a reporter to really just being more of a fanboy, or more of a like not even just a beat writer anymore, just being someone who just really doesn't have the public's mind and interest? I don't know if that's the right way to really describe it.
I get what you're saying, and this goes at one of actually the greater, questions in journalistic sort of, not to get, I hate making it sound too academic, but it is one of the great kind of academic questions of journalism, and practical questions as well, in terms of ethics, in terms of what kind of information is reportable and what angle do you take. You always have to be careful if you're being serious about it, to not be to be willing to look with an objective eye at whatever you're looking and whatever you're reporting at, but at the same time. And this gets interesting too, because I know I've had this conversation with a few people, because one of my favorite conversations I had was with one of the better known beat writers. I can't remember if it was Chris Vanini or who it was, but the question was like, how much information do you not report on? And not because it's not like a secrecy to try and ensure, because I mean there's another side to this, and a more nefarious side, that as the years have passed, sports information directors have gotten more control, athletic departments have gotten more control. Not sports information directors, they're just they're just a part of the machine. So it's actually been harder for some sports journalists to even get access to players, to coaches. So people will have to play the game a little bit more, and kind of, in a way, depending on how powerful your media entity is, how much you can even really say in certain circumstances. But setting that aside, somebody who is playing, a proper journalistic role, sometimes they get lots of information and they just don't report on it because it isn't really, while it might sound salacious, it isn't necessarily relevant to really anything pertinent to the sport, or it's something where they just can't substantiate it enough. And of course, sometimes those end up being true, and sometimes they're not. And some institutions of media outlets will have much more rigorous requirements, like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and more the ones that take themselves extremely seriously, while some who are more on, and I'm not dissing blogs, but I mean, the more casual you get, the more likely you might be willing to run with something wild. Or, if you're just sort of a freelancer on a Twitter account, you might be willing to run with something wild. And I'm not saying like RCFB, we do some reporting, but we're also, we're as Jake was explaining, we're more of a kitchen sink kind of operation. And we put no airs on to assume that we're, going to compete with the Associated Press or anything like that. But it's tricky, and sometimes this has to even do with, gosh, some of the respect that and disrespect that goes within the journalistic profession towards sports journalism. Historically, if you read sort of the studies of journalism, the sports is considered the toy department. I've heard it written that way, and I love that. It's stuck with me ever since. because it's the silly, people are writing about war, people are writing about, important political issues that are affecting, millions of people. And then it's like, oh, by the way, these guys totally screwed up on the field. So, I mean, there's that aspect of it as well. And I mean, part of it, that's what makes it so joyful to report on, because, in the end of the day, sometimes there's some really horrible things that happen, but most of the time it's sports, and it's fun, and it's frivolous. But I think because of that, there's some more room for people to do things in their reporting that would never be okay, and certainly would be quicker to be slapped down if it weren't sports. Or, another analog, I'm not, I always see it brought up because it's like, sports journalists can also, we're always classically, they were ones worried about people looking down on them in the journalistic, in the newsroom, but then they can now look down on, I guess, the video game reporters, or something like that. So, I mean, it's that kind of, the further down you go, the more wild and kind of weird the reporting gets. But, and I apologize to kind of turn that into a more abstract answer, because you brought up an interesting question on how, reporters comport themselves. And it can be tricky, I think, sometimes if you're not careful to let your fan hat come into play. Like, I fully admit, I went to USC, I went to the University of Minnesota. I really, I get some joy when at least when USC does well. When Minnesota does well, it's more humorous. But it's at the same time, you always have to be careful not to be that. And I was generally worried, because I tend to cover the national championship for our CFB. There was a brief moment towards the end of last season where I'm like, there is not an insignificant chance that USC might accidentally slip into the playoff and either get blown out or somehow get into the national championship and get blown out. In which case, what the hell? Wow, that's going to be a wild one to have to deal with. I live in Minnesota, so I don't really have to deal with reporting on that team. But well, Jake can, and hopefully he will, out in Southern California. But yeah, no, that's a great question, and I'm glad you brought it up. Goodness, that was an academic.
Yeah, that was a good answer.
Can you tell I'm a professor on the side? Not in journalism, but at least in something. Yeah, no, I
know. I feel like I owe you like $2,500 for a credit now.
Oh, please! No.
I'll pay you when I can, though.
Oh man! Well, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and use this as an opportunity to slowly go ahead and wrap us up. I had a whole lineup of things on NIL to talk about, because we have all of these proposals. There's like literally at this point, there's 5 congressional proposals. The bottom line, and I personally agree with this, one of my favorite sports law writers and professors, Michael McCann, that the odds of any of these current things in Congress moving forward is still pretty low. We keep hearing new ones. They flash in the pan for a day or two, and then we don't hear about them again, because there's so many rival plans right now, and they're all bipartisan. So it's not like any of them are team A or team B. It's just everyone wants to put their name on it. So whether we'll ever get anywhere with this NIL stuff on the federal level, we'll save that for another show. But we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank all of you who joined us. This was a good talk. We always do these on Tuesday nights. We typically go for about an hour or so. My name's Bobak Hayeri. This was RCFB Talk 148 on, well, I guess it's no longer Twitter. I guess it's X. I don't know if we call it a Twitter space, X space, SpaceX. But X going to give it to you. I'm going to go ahead and hang up and listen.